Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is noon from my end. Sure, from your end is also noon. Today is indeed a good day because it is the second day of, the week. Yeah, I tend to call it the second day of the week because this is, I see Monday as my first day. Though a lot of people will say it's Sunday, but to me, I see Monday as my first day because that's when people go to work and do a lot of things. Today being Tuesday is my second day. And of course, I can see, a couple of names on my attendees list, a couple of familiar names. You guys are once again welcome. I think we'll just take it off from here. Good afternoon once again for those of you guys that are joining us for the first time. My name is Gagba Esahaya, and I'm the training coordinator with the Temple Small Business Development Center. The Temple Small Business Development Center helps small businesses start and grow. We offer free one-on-one consulting and a variety of low to no-cost webinars. We are proud to be part of the nationally accredited network of the Small Business Development Centers, which has over 1,000 networks across the United States. You are here this afternoon for a webinar on website planning series, where you should build your website. A copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recording will be sent to all the attendees. Being a webinar, once again, all attendees have been muted. However, we always encourage you guys to drop your question on the Q&A or the chat box. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome once again my wonderful Jenny, even as she takes over the floor for the presentation. Jenny, you are welcome.
Thank you, Garba, as always, for an invigorating introduction. I'm seeing the first question in the chat already, and as Garba mentioned, yes, recordings will be sent out as well as the slides from the presentation. So Michelle, go and head off to your other meeting knowing that you will get all the information that we're about to talk about here today. For everyone else, we'll go ahead and get started. I will share my screen. Oh, I will show you something worth showing. All right. So I'm Jenn Wells. I am the co-founder and marketing director of BrandSwan, and we are here today to talk about building your website. So you're probably just getting started. Maybe you've got a website on one platform, you're not convinced it's the best one, and you want to know what's the best place to go for a website that's efficient, effective, and it's going to help me get customers. So we're going to compare some of the most common website platforms: Squarespace, WordPress, Shopify, and Wix. There are so many others. I don't want you to think these are the only options, but those are the main ones we're going to talk about today. A little bit of information about me. Like I said, marketing director of BrandSwan, reformed perfectionist, obsessed with efficiency, templates, mapping out deliverables, due dates, everything bullet points, while my business partner, Jane, is the super creative one. And I am also a parent, dog owner, compulsive reader, and I offer consultations. If you finish up this presentation, you're like, I'd really love to just pick her brain for an hour, feel free to schedule with me for a consultation. A little bit about BrandSwan. That's Jane. She is the, like I said, the tidal wave creativity behind BrandSwan, and I'm the due date person. Our team has grown to about 8 people in the last couple of years. And all you really need to know about us is we create beautiful brands, savvy websites, and marketing that matters. All right, we'll get right into this. What is a website builder? So this is the best place to start because there's lots of different ways and places to build a website, but all of the platforms we're going to talk about today are essentially this. They're website builders. This means that you don't have to be a website developer. You don't have to write code. You're not in there creating, HTML tags and CSS. You can use a tool that is drag and drop and helps you build the website without having all that background knowledge. There might still be a little bit of a learning curve, but essentially it's going to help you do the work without being a coder. Like I said, there's tons and tons of platforms. These are the big 4 that I most commonly see people using. These are the ones I'm going to talk about. But if you have something else that's not in this list, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. That just means that it's another option. And what you can do is take a look at the features of the one you're considering using and compare it to this presentation or to these different sites. And that'll give you a good idea of how it ranks with the other ones. It's not always just about cost, because the cheapest option will not help you much if you cannot actually get your website built. So you definitely want to compare features side by side before you make your decision. That being said, even though I like to say there's no wrong answer, there's a couple of things I don't recommend. Not to pick on GoDaddy too much, but in general, If a company or a platform has been built for one thing, in this case, hosting or constant contacts built for email, and then they add something on like, oh yeah, we build websites now too. Chances are their website builder is not going to be as good as a company that just built a website builder, because for them, it's an afterthought. It's something they added on later. And having worked with both of these, I would not recommend. I know it can be convenient if you're hosting with GoDaddy to just go ahead and use their website builder, but from what I've played around with, it was just really limiting. It was frustrating to use. Honestly, I found it to be harder to learn than using Wix or some of the other ones. So I don't recommend, but if you decide to go ahead anyway, you don't need my permission. You can do whatever works best for you. All right, so getting into some things to consider. This is just the overview of all the things we're going to talk about today. So don't feel like you need to screenshot or memorize this. But I'm going to talk about the initial setup, getting started with these platforms, how easy they are to use once you've got that account built, how customizable the different themes are, and then search engine optimization. So once you've got it set up, are you going to be able to be found for search? How much customization do you get with that? We're going to talk about adding extra functionality, things like event calendars, plugins, my mind's blanking, lead generation forms, things like that, e-commerce, and then tech support. All right, so moving into it. And when we come back to this, this is just my star ratings for how well I thought each of these platforms did in these areas. 3 being the most stars, 1 being the least. So just to kind of give you a broad overview, and hopefully this chart will be helpful later. Oh, and actually, sorry, one last note. You'll see the prices at the bottom. They all have a pretty big range, and that's because a lot of these platforms offer a free or a very inexpensive starting package, but a lot of times you're not going to be able to use that package because it doesn't include basic things like having a custom domain name. So for example, Wix would be wix.bobsrestaurant.com. So that's not going to make you look very professional. You're probably going to want to spring for at least the next package up. And if you've got e-commerce, you're going to be a couple different packages up. So just keep that in mind with the price ranges. The bottom number you see is probably not the one that you're going to use. All right, so initial setup. This is, yes, Jacqueline asked if I will elaborate by extended functionality. I'm going to talk about all of these terms in detail, so don't worry, we'll get to that. All right, so starting with the very first step, you're ready to build this website and you're wondering, what do I do? How do I go through with it? So each of these platforms has a different level of complexity for setting them up. For Squarespace, Shopify, and Wix, the complexity level is low. They're very easy to get started. You go to squarespace.com, wix.com, create an account, and then it will guide you through the process. And you basically just hit next, next, next. You fill in your website information, you pick a template, you set it up, and then it's ready to start building. So it's pretty easy to go. With WordPress, there is a platform that's similar to these other ones called WordPress.com. We're actually going to talk about WordPress.org. And the difference there is WordPress.com is a website that you go to, you log in, you make your account, you build a website there. We're not doing that. We're setting up your own hosting account, installing WordPress on your account, and then that gives you a much greater level of flexibility without having to nickel and dime you for things like adding fonts or adding colors or customizing your site. So this is, whenever you work with a web designer, there's a good chance that they're using WordPress.org, that they're using a self-installed WordPress on your host or on their own host. So just keep that in mind. And if there are questions about WordPress.com, WordPress.org, I can elaborate, but just for the purposes of this presentation, think of WordPress as something that you own and have control of, and you're not beholden to Squarespace.com or Wix.com for your website to not go down. So it gives you greater control, greater flexibility. Some other terminology to know: hosting is where your website files live. So that home page with all of the words that you have about your business, that's the web page file. And the place where that's stored online is the web host. The domain is the URL that points to your website. So, this is one of our clients, bigalseatery.com, right? It points, it's like the signpost or the address that points to where the website lives. So that's the difference between hosting and domain. I talked about WordPress.com, WordPress.org. Okay, so getting into some previews. This is what a typical web host would look like. And so, like I said, there's a couple extra steps because this would be for WordPress. You would have to set up an account with the host first. And then after you get started, then you install WordPress on your host. So there's a little bit more to get into it, a little bit more to get started. That being said, most hosts have a WordPress installer where, again, you're just clicking next, next, next. It's not terribly complicated. Someone asked, are there any free hosting sites? Not that I know of, and I would be hesitant to use them if there were. This is one of those things where you get what you pay for. So if it is free, it probably isn't going to have much bandwidth or reliability that your website's going to stay up. Just like the other website platforms we talked about, there might be a free option, but you're not going to be able to have a custom domain. It's probably going to have their logo in your footer, things like that. So unless you don't have very high standards for the look of your site, most likely no, there's not a free option you're going to be happy with. Okay. So moving on from initial setup, like I said, Squarespace, Wix, and Shopify are just go to the site, click next, next, next. WordPress is the only one that requires a host. So that one is a little bit more complicated than the other three. Once you get in, they're all kind of similar in terms of ease of use. They have these graphical builders. So the UI is basically like, you have the site in front of you, and then you select elements and you click, you drag and drop, you put them into your site. So they're pretty simple. For my personal ranking, I found Shopify and Squarespace to be the easiest to use. Squarespace, some of the settings weren't where I expected them to be. So digging around to figure out how to set fonts and things, that was a little bit challenging. Shopify is similar. Once you figure out where things are, it's pretty easy. Wix has a lot of features. And so it's not necessarily harder, it's just that there's more options. So that sidebar is more cluttered with stuff to look at. So for me, it took a little bit longer to figure out how to go through it. Saving WordPress for last because, like with the initial setup, it's a little bit more complicated to get started with WordPress. There are some free themes, but the one you're going to want to use is going to be a website builder, which is going to be something like Divi or Elementor, and you're going to have to install that on top of WordPress. So I know this sounds like a lot because you're installing one thing after another. You're setting up hosting, you're adding WordPress, and then you're installing the theme. But again, depending on what level of customization you want, it could be worth it in the end. And a lot of times designers will do that because they want to be able to build you something custom and beautiful, and they have high standards. But for something that you want to DIY and do it yourself, maybe it's not worth it to do that extra level of effort. So this is a screenshot of WordPress showing the Divi editor. So this is one of the ones that I mentioned. And so this is the back end, which can be a little bit confusing, but Divi also lets you edit on the front end. And I can actually give you an example of that. Bear with me for just a second. So this is our website, which we do have Divi installed. And so when you're editing, it's not these scary boxes where you have to figure out where things are. It is, give this 1 second to load. And there is a whole separate presentation on Website Builder, so I'm not going to go too far in depth with this, but it will let me hover over the elements that I want to edit, click onto them, and then edit the text right there. So this is really handy because you can see the edits that you're making in the actual website. You're not trying to figure it out from that back-end screenshot from my slides. Oh, what did I use to build my own website? This is my website. I used WordPress and Divi, but we're web designers. So take that with a caveat. We know this technology, we're comfortable with it. Our whole team knows how to use it. I don't necessarily recommend it to clients unless you're pretty tech savvy and you feel comfortable teaching yourself. Okay, so getting back over to presentation. So that's kind of the backside of Divi, and it's the cool thing about this is it shows you how websites are built, right? So there's these sections, that's the box that holds the content, and then there's rows that help break it up so you can have things side by side like a picture and text or 2 columns of text, and then there's the actual content itself. And so this is back to like web development basics, right? Like how do websites work? And it's just basically lots of boxes and content sitting inside those boxes. So I do like that the back end can show you that, but the actual editing happens on the front end, which is what the website looks like. All right, getting back into pretty slideshow. Squarespace, if anything, even simpler because the website's there. Here's the different options that you can drop in there. And then once the text is in, you just click on it and you edit. A lot of these are going to look really similar. So this is Shopify. You've got the page here. You've got your, I'll call these widgets, but you could call them modules. You could call them content elements, whatever you want to call them. And it's literally just click, drag it over here, and then edit. So all of them have a similar drag and drop interface where you're just selecting what you want. I want text here, I want an image here, and you're just pulling it into the page. And this is where you can see Wix. It's all the same stuff as the other ones, but it looks more complicated just because there's more. There's more in here, so it can look a little overwhelming at first. Whereas, Shopify, Squarespace, they're just really clean, simple interfaces, and it's easy to get started right away. All right, customization. So you're probably wondering why I mentioned WordPress at all, because it hasn't been ranking very well so far. It's just been, it's harder. This is where WordPress becomes a huge asset, because the other website builders, they have themes. You pick a theme, maybe it's beautiful, you swap the images and the text, but that's pretty much it. It's not as easy to customize things. It's not as easy to build something that looks truly unique. And I will show some examples of websites that are built on these different platforms so you can see what I mean. You might look at it and say, oh, I don't care about that. And a lot of people won't. A lot of people can't tell that something is a Squarespace website. But we can tell. And depending how tech savvy your clients are, maybe they can tell, or maybe you want something more custom and fancy. So we'll take a look at that in a second. So like I said, WordPress is the most customizable. If you can imagine it, you can build it. And especially within the last 5 to 10 years, things that used to be impossible, right? Like having curves in the page, having, like images can move in front of other images. There's just so many cool things you can do. There's animations, there's movement, there are little engaging elements. It's just incredibly customizable. You can pick a theme and just work with that. You can build something custom. There's really, like I said, no limit. Versus, Squarespace, Shopify, Wix, you're picking a theme. I would say Wix is probably the hardest one to customize that theme. You're pretty much just picking the best one you can find, or the one that feels the most close to your brand, and then you're just using it as is. Squarespace and Shopify, they let you customize to a certain extent, but it can be difficult to do a whole lot more than that. And one thing that I learned actually fairly recently, Squarespace, as it updates to a new version, which happens, every couple of years, all of the old themes and templates stop getting updated. So as new technology rolls out and new features roll out, those websites are going to start looking really dated because you can't use those new features. You would have to recreate your website on the new version with the new theme. So that seems like a huge drawback to Squarespace. That being said, that's a huge issue. I am sure they'll fix it at some point. But I had a friend who just switched over from Squarespace to WordPress, even though she was afraid of the technology, because she didn't want to have to completely redo her website every 2 years because it wasn't, being supported or updated. Okay, so getting into the examples that I promised. This is a Wix website. And so from the front end, I don't know if you can really tell. It looks good. It's got that little parallax scrolling trick. Obviously, she's updated with her, her fonts and colors. But this is an example of, this is a single page site. This was a cool template. And so the template had this back here, and it has a background color here. So maybe we could make that, less transparent to make the text easier to read. There's some small changes we could make, but if you wanted to move this section over to the other side of the screen, sorry, right? Like this is the way the template is laid out. These are the columns, these are the sections. This picture being higher than this probably looked better on the template version, whatever it was styled as, but you can't just, shift that down or move them around because the template is set up this way. And so that's where I'm talking about, you might not care. You might be happy to pick a good template and just work with it. But I've seen what happens when people break templates that started out pretty. And then after editing it and putting content in there that wasn't a good fit for the design, then it no longer looks so polished. It doesn't look as professional anymore. So just be careful when you're picking templates. Make sure that your content makes sense for what you're choosing. This one is a Squarespace website. And so like I said, Squarespace has some more modern themes now. I would say this one is this very like classic Squarespace look. As a designer, I can usually tell it's Squarespace when it's, a colorful header, very simple white background the whole way through until the footer. And so it's, it's clean. It's not unattractive, but it's just plain. It's really plain. It's really simple. And if you're looking for something more interesting, this might be frustrating to be limited to this. That being said, Squarespace has some new templates that are a little bit fancier. You just have to make sure that you're choosing to be on the most current platform. And then keep in mind that, every couple of years, you'll have to choose whether to let your style get outdated or pick a new, redo your website completely. You guys already saw our site, but I'll go through it again. This is WordPress. Ignore these faded things. That's elements that are hidden. Actually, let me do this. BrandSwan. This will get rid of the website builder elements. So you can see we've got some fancy things with the movements and the feathers. We've got this gradient. We've got, this is a very subtle movement effect where this slides up as you scroll down through the page. And then sliders, same thing with this one with it sliding through the page. Being able to, well, you can do this with a lot of things, import our own scheduling form from a different tool. So there's just a lot of customization available here. And we can do pretty much whatever we want with this website. So that's our site. And then another example, and I'm just realizing I don't have a Shopify site for you guys, so I apologize. This is another WordPress site. And so ours is, we have some modern elements that, I think make it look cool or fancy or whatever, but I just wanted to show you this one as well to show you there really are no limits to what you can do with WordPress. So this is another WordPress site. There's movement, there's crazy graphical elements. This is for a concert venue in Wilmington, which is why, it makes sense for them to go this elaborate with the design. Like this looks like a neon sign. This website is one of ours that we use for inspiration when we're thinking about how can we break out of the box and do things that are unique and unexpected. So this is something you'd probably have to hire a web designer for, but just keep in the back of your mind that with WordPress, you can do anything, you can do really cool things. Okay, so those are my examples. Getting back into presentation mode. Does Squarespace allow for animations? Yes, the newer themes do. The one that I showed you that's one of the ones where it was outdated and she has since moved to WordPress because she got frustrated with the fact that there's no support once they update the version. But I've seen some newer templates that do have a little bit of movement in them. You can't customize the movement. So I apologize for going back here. So you see how those feathers move? That wasn't a template, right? We chose to have them move that way. And if we wanted to make them fly, spin around in circles and fly off the page, we could do that too. So we can do pretty much any animation that we want on this. Whereas with the Squarespace site, it's just whatever the theme came with. You can't customize that to the same level. But yes, some of the newer themes are really nice. So I'm not saying don't use Squarespace, and just keep in mind some of the limitations. All right, moving into search engine optimization. Once you've got your website built and you want people to start finding it on Google or Bing or whatever search engines your target audience is using, your search engine optimization is going to become very important because this is how search engines know that you exist. And so just a quick background on SEO. This is how well you rank when someone searches for your key phrases. So ideally your key phrase is something that describes what you do. Maybe it's, Philadelphia bakery. For us, it's Delaware web designer. A lot of times that geo or the locational based search term is going to help you a lot, because even if your business is service-based and it's completely online, that's the first thing people search. Is they want to search, coach near me, lifestyle coach, health coach near me, health coach in Delaware, and it just makes them feel more comfortable to know that you're local, you're a real person. You can definitely try to rank for national keywords, but you're going to be fighting against a lot of other businesses. Think thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of businesses, versus locally, you might have 20 competitors within your city that you're competing with. And so it's a lot easier to get on the first page for your city, for your state, than it is for the whole country. For the whole country, you're probably going to have to pay some money towards Google AdWords. So just keeping in mind, there are some limitations with keywords. You got to pick the right ones. Again, I know that Temple has a presentation completely on that, so please come join us later this month if you want to know more about SEO and website traffic. Okay, so this screenshot here, this is an SEO plugin you can add to WordPress. So WordPress doesn't come with it, but because it's so customizable, you can add pretty much any plugin you want to help you with SEO. Yoast is our favorite, and that's why I've got the demo here. It literally lets you put in any keyword you want. So again, for us, web design Delaware, and then it gives you this ranking and it tells you what you're doing well, what's okay, and what really needs to be improved. So it'll tell you things like your keyword needs to be mentioned in more of the headers. Your text is too long. It's too hard to read, because anything that's written above a 5th grade reading level is going to rank less well, because Google is looking for things that people can get information from quickly. They're skimming, they're not reading research papers. So keep that in mind when you're writing your copy. Even if you're not going to use any sort of SEO tool and you just want kind of like the best practices, think about what search terms people will use to look for your business. What would you type into Google if you were looking for your business? Incorporate that word. I would say every 2 or 3 paragraphs, and in at least 2 or 3 headers in a long page. If it's a really short page, then 1 header and 1 paragraph is fine. So just incorporate it every so often as you're writing content, and then write as if you were talking to your target audience right in front of you. So what would you say to your customer, and how would you make it easy for them to understand? If you try to write for the search engines, you'll probably sound like you're a robot, and Google is smarter than that now. They're looking for content that is easy to read for humans, not for robots. So just, keep it conversational, informative, and then throw that keyword in there every so often, and you will be okay. So like I said, WordPress, my favorite for SEO. The other ones, I am not satisfied with their SEO options, because they do things like, we'll do it for you. But you don't actually know what they're doing. So Squarespace, for example, it doesn't let you choose your keywords. So I don't understand how they can possibly do your SEO for you, because they're doing it based on the copy that you wrote, which isn't necessarily optimized for your keyword, because if you're not an SEO copywriter, you didn't know how to do that. So I don't know how they can optimize it well when you're not telling them the keyword to search for. So that's something, I don't know, I'm skeptical of that one. Same thing with Shopify and Wix. They give you some basic SEO features, but they don't list out exactly what it is you can change. They're kind of vague. They just say like, yes, we have SEO tools. That being said, most of these platforms, let me do a time check real quick to make sure I'm not going over. Okay, most of these platforms offer extended functionality, which I'm going to get into on the next slide. And so in those extended functionality, it's like a library of extra tools you can add. And so most of them do have some type of SEO tool that you can add from, that library. So even though they don't come with it directly, there's other things that you can use. Although I didn't make a note for that for Wix. So Wix, I'm not 100% sure if they have any SEO tools or if it's just the basic ones that come with the website. All right, so getting more into that extended functionality. So this is basically like, you get X package that you purchase, but you want to be able to add extra things in there. And so they all have some sort of library of extra things. And I keep saying things because they all call it something different. So for WordPress, that's plugins. For Squarespace, it's extensions. For Shopify and Wix, it's apps. All of those words mean the same thing though. It just means ways to add some type of tool or some type of function to your website that it doesn't have automatically. So examples of that, it could be social media sharing tools, it could be an events calendar, it could be the ability to add a directory, things like that. One quick note on Squarespace versus the other ones. So like I said, WordPress, if you can imagine it, there's a plugin for it. Some of them are paid plugins. Like the better the functionality you get with it, the more likely it is that you have to pay for it. But a lot of them have a freemium model, which means that there's a free one that gives you the basic functionality. And then if you really like it and you want to get the extra features, then you pay the subscription, which is typically either monthly or annual. Very few things are operating on the flat rate model anymore. Everything, everybody wants to get money on a retainer. They don't want to just collect money once for their services. So that's good and bad, because the fact that you're paying monthly or annually means that they're constantly releasing new updates. They're keeping security up to date. So even though it's a pain to have to commit, to a monthly payment for a service, it does ensure that your website's more secure. So pros and cons to that. But anyway, so WordPress has everything you can imagine. Someone has thought of it. Someone has made a plugin for it. For Squarespace and Wix, they do have those libraries with extra tools, but they are a little bit more limited. Whereas Shopify is actually pretty competitive with WordPress in the amount of extra apps that they have. They just have a ton of things you can add to your Shopify website. Extra note, Squarespace. So they have this little like, oh, you can do anything you want with Zapier. Zapier is a tool that you can connect two different things together. You can integrate them and it will let you set up different pieces of functionality. But even as, a web designer and someone who's fairly tech savvy, I have struggled to find a Zapier connection that's actually been useful. Every time I think, oh, I'll just connect these tools, I'll make them talk to each other. You can't necessarily control what exact pieces of functionality it allows for. So recent example, we have a project management system called Teamwork. We just set up QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online has the ability to have projects. Wouldn't it be great if the projects we had in Teamwork were also in QuickBooks? So I went to Zapier, I added both programs, and they just don't have that feature, right? You can add your customers from one to the other. You can add time, billing, and invoices, but you can't add the actual projects themselves. And so that's how Zapier is. It's tricky. Even if the program you want is in there, that doesn't mean the exact connection you want is going to be in there. So anytime someone says, oh, you can do anything you want with Zapier, just be a little skeptical of that. Do your research before you use that as a selling point. Okay. So kind of building on that extra functionality, the big thing we didn't talk about yet is e-commerce. So while I would love to say WordPress, WordPress is great for installing something like WooCommerce. This is an extra thing that you need to add, right? WordPress is basically just a foundation for adding every little piece of customization you want. So you have to add something else like WooCommerce. And the setup is a little bit more complicated. So just keep in mind, if you want to use WooCommerce, there's probably going to be a little bit of a learning curve. It could be worth hiring someone to help you set it up and then show you how to use it. And then after that, managing the products is really easy. But yeah, it's just, it's a great tool, super customizable. But again, that extra learning curve to get started. Squarespace and Wix do e-commerce. It's basic. It's fine. I'll just say that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. Meanwhile, Shopify was specifically developed to do e-commerce. So like I said earlier about picking the platform that was developed to solve that particular problem, right? Like Constant Contact is for email, not for website building. Shopify is for an e-commerce website. And so if you're ready to get started with your, online sales to go along with your brick and mortar business, I would recommend Shopify because they're already set up with you in mind. You're not going to have to add extra functions. You're not going to have to fight with Wix to set up, some type of payment processing or connecting with your in-person payment portal. They've already thought about all this stuff and they're going to have solutions for you. So definitely think about Shopify if you are a retail business. And then this screenshot here, this is actually from WooCommerce on our website. We had to use WooCommerce because we're a WordPress website, but again, unless you're ready to go the extra mile and you really need or want that extra level of customization, I don't necessarily recommend going that route. So some screenshots just showing the back end for the different options for e-commerce. This is what WooCommerce looks like on the backside. So you can see, this is the product title. This is the description. There's a few different options over here for things like setting inventory. So you can say like, I have 10 of these and after that, no more sales. Shipping, you can add coupon codes. You can do so much more than I can even think of, honestly. And then this is the gallery. So when people want to flip through and see the different versions of it, that's what's over here. You can also add categories. So, in our case, we have notebooks and mugs. Maybe you have t-shirts and hats. Whatever your categories are, you can tag things and then people can sort them in the different parts of your store. So Squarespace, you can see this is a lot simpler. This might look appealing at first because Squarespace does a great job with really clean, really simple interfaces. So definitely for a learning curve, they're probably the ones I recommend because it is easy to get started. It's easy to get in there and figure it out right away. They have this, instead of having that big long thing where you scroll and there's tons of options, it's really just these tabs that you click through and then you can, save and publish and boom, now you've got a product in the store. Shopify, you can see that there's a little bit more over here, but I love their options that they have because like I said, they're designed for retail stores. So they've got analytics, you've got information on your customers. Note WooCommerce has this too, but the analytics I haven't seen anywhere else. Marketing discounts, it can connect with your other apps to help you market. It's just really, really well done. And it's not that intimidating. Like to me, this interface looks cleaner and easier to use than the WooCommerce one. And then Wix. Wix is like Squarespace. It's pretty simple. It's pretty clean. What you see is what you get, right? There's not a whole lot of complexity here. All right, just checking for questions about, is Squarespace connected to the Square? Oh, no. So Square is a separate payment system. Squarespace is the website builder. So they have similar names, but they're not actually affiliated with each other. That being said, it's possible that Squarespace would let you connect to your Square system. I have not researched that particular integration, so I can't tell you 100%. That being said, I bet Shopify is more likely to be able to do that. So yeah, that's just a coincidence that the names are similar. Okay. Tech support. So this one, I'm just going to say it. It's very difficult to get support. So WordPress, it's, because it's a free platform that's made available for anyone to install, there's no paid employees sitting there waiting to help you. But there are tons of people who have written, articles, done videos. It's very easy to find someone who had the same problem that you did, and then someone who has already answered their question or given them the tutorial for how to solve it. So if you're good at troubleshooting and you're good at, Googling and finding the answer and reading it and following the tutorial, then WordPress will be great. But if you need someone there, on chat support or to be able to call someone, the only website you're getting that with is Shopify. So Wix will tell you, oh yes, we've got tech support. But speaking as someone who has worked with one of the lower level web packages, there was no response to that support ticket. It went off into the interwebs and it disappeared and no one ever got back to me. So they actually have better support if you have one of the higher level packages. So they're not holding you hostage exactly, but unless you are paying them enough to be worth their while, they're not providing support. And then Squarespace, as far as I can tell, there's really no support at all. It's like WordPress where you're Googling and you're trying to find someone who's had the same problem. So those are the different levels. And I guess this is another vote of confidence for Shopify because they are really the only ones who actually have tech support. This screenshot is from Shopify. You know, they've got phone, Twitter, email, chat, like not just one, they have so many options. So this is, you know, I want to say unheard of, but I'm sure there's some other platform that does this. It's way better than the other options if you know that you're going to need someone there to walk you through things. All right. So winding down, I think I've answered the questions in the Q&A. Let me check the chat real quick. Okay, I'll go ahead and finish up and then I'll get to chat. So what do you do after your website is set up? There's a couple other presentations that Temple is having. I'll actually be presenting about website content, how to write content for your website, but we have some freebies on our website if you're interested in this. So this is a worksheet that helps you map out your pages and write the content for your site. So if you're looking at that blank canvas and you're like, I don't know what to do with it, I don't know how to write content people are going to care about, this is a tool that could help you. And then this last slide in the presentation is links and resources for the things that I referenced throughout the presentation. So, you know, if you decide you want to get started with one of these platforms, or if you decide you want to set up your own host, this is the host that we recommend, and this is actually our referral link if you want to use it. No pressure. Our preferred theme, our preferred SEO plugin, e-commerce. So all of this is for WordPress. And then the link to the content template that I just showed you and the link to schedule consultation with me. All right. Okay, so I see that I missed some questions in the chat, so I will go back and try to find them. Oh, so someone said with the platforms like Wix, they are the host. Yes. So Wix, Squarespace, and Shopify, they are both the website builder and they are hosting your files. And that's why it's a little bit simpler than setting up your own host and installing WordPress, because you have to control both of those, whereas with the other ones, it's a package deal. Can you move your site and domain to a different host? I currently have my site with GoDaddy and I would like it with Squarespace. Yes. Well, yes, with a caveat. So your domain, absolutely. You can transfer that wherever you need to. You can also leave it with GoDaddy and point it to a different host that's not GoDaddy because they're also a domain registrar. So that domain can point anywhere. Moving the site itself is difficult. So Squarespace websites and WordPress websites will let you export the content and then you can import it somewhere else. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure about the GoDaddy website builder if they have a tool like that. So you can look for it, definitely. It would be called something like, you know, export. And then once you have those files, you can see if they match up to something else. I will actually, I'll research this and I will send it to Garba to send with the follow-up because I want to know the answer to that question too. All right, does WordPress allow custom domain names? Yes, WordPress allows custom everything. So this is another thing you'll have to set up. So if you're hosting your own site, you've got WordPress installed, you also need to buy that domain name. That would be with a domain registrar. So that could be something like Google Domains. It could even be with GoDaddy and then pointing at your own host. It could be, you know, there's a lot of different domain registrars. That being said, I recommend Google Domains because they have some of the lowest prices and they include privacy. So when people are looking at domains, they can see who owns the domains. And if you don't pay for privacy, they'll see your name and then they'll send you lots of spam emails or spam, you know, snail mail. So Google Domains knows, hey, nobody wants their email published out there, so everyone gets free privacy. Whereas GoDaddy doesn't do that. They want an upcharge for that. Can you add and delete photos to update products? Yes, that is a pretty universal feature to any of the e-commerce websites, being able to update your products. Oh, what about developing an online class? That's an interesting one because it really depends which pieces of functionality you want. So when you think about an online course, a lot of times there's, modules, and you can see your progress through the course, and it lets you, complete lessons as you move through. Sometimes there's quizzes, things like that. And so you could try to recreate that on any of these builders, but it's not going to be a true course because there's not, well, and I shouldn't say it's not at all, because again, with WordPress, I'm sure there's a plugin or an add-on or something that you can build in there, but just using Wix by itself or just using Squarespace by itself, no, there's not going to be a way to do that exact thing. We actually do have a quiz on our website, and that was an extra plugin that we had to pay for. So even on WordPress, that was something that cost more money. So I'm going to say if the main focus of your website is this online course, I would probably use a different platform for that, one that is tailored specifically to courses. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I'm having trouble thinking of what a good option would be. Let me do a quick Google. Online course creator. Teachable.com and Thinkific are two that I've heard. Oh, and Coursify. So Coursify, Thinkific, that one's kind of a tongue twister, and Teachable are ones that I've heard of. And so I would just honestly Google it, online course creator, and then compare the features the same way we did in the presentation today. If I already bought a domain name, am I going through this backwards? No. Okay. So if I already bought a domain name, can I change it to Google Domains? Yes. So you can always change your domain registrar, and it's kind of a pain. So depending where you have it, it might be more or less difficult, because they want to make sure that it's not a hacker. They want to make sure that it's actually you transferring the domain. So typically what you have to do is go to whoever owns your domain now, and you have to say, hey, I'm going to transfer this, or unlock. You have to open it up so that someone else can take it. Then you go to the new domain registrar and you say, I want to transfer in a domain. You type it in, and then it will send information to your old domain registrar. You go back into the old one, you click confirm, yes, I want it to go to this one. And then within a couple of days, it should make the transfer. So it is kind of a pain. It involves going back and forth between the sites, but it is doable. Okay, is WordPress the page builder? Then what is Divi? So WordPress, I will actually show you because I have this open already. All right, give this a second to load. So this is what WordPress looks like. This is, we set up a host, we installed WordPress on the host, and then by default, it doesn't, this is a lot of extra added stuff, but by default, it gives you pages, posts, it gives you some basic themes to choose from. And so there will be maybe 5 different really basic themes that you can use. Those ones are fine. They're not great. They're not a whole lot better than, Wix or Squarespace or whatever else. So then Divi is a theme that we added that gives us that level of customization where we can build it on the front end, where we can add any elements we want, and we can create as many columns as we want. And we're not limited to just doing the layout that this gives us. And so let's see if I can see a preview. Nope. Okay. But getting back in here. So, this theme from WordPress, the image goes here, the text goes here, the button is there. It's not going to let you rearrange things and get really fancy with it. Whereas with Divi, with our theme, we can do pretty much anything we want. We could even do stuff like this if it was the right kind of website for it. Can you add Divi to Shopify? No, Divi is a WordPress theme. So each builder has its own themes that you can use on there. So Divi is for WordPress, Shopify has its own themes. Most of the ones, like they have a bunch of free ones that are available within Shopify, but I think Shopify actually has some paid options too. That would be more complicated because you'd buy it somewhere else and then you would install it. But as far as customization, I think Shopify comes second behind WordPress. All right. Security. How likely is it to have your website hacked? And what if you have no idea how to fix it? There is a really great presentation about website security, I want to say next week. But look in the list of Temple events, because there's one that is just dedicated to that topic. And I think that would be really great to help put your mind at ease. That being said, how likely is it to have your website hacked? It depends, right? It depends how big your website is, how much traffic you're getting. If you have a tiny little website, you've got 10 visitors a month, then it's unlikely the hackers are going to find it in the first place, and it's unlikely they're going to want to put in the effort to break into it. That being said, sometimes you'll find that your website gets redirected to like an online pharmacy, or a porn site or something like that. And so that's something that happens pretty frequently. That doesn't mean that someone broke into your website itself, but they added some code that redirects from your domain to theirs. And so the ways that you can prevent that are things like making a custom URL to log into your website. And you know what, actually, I'm talking about WordPress. So let me give you both answers. This is the WordPress answer, and then I'll give you the other platform answer. And then other things you can do, make sure that you know all the users on your website, that they all have decent passwords that are not easy to guess, and make sure that you keep your plugins and your theme up to date. So every so often, the plugins will need to be updated when this loads in a second. So you can see, and this is the update. If any of these needed to be updated now, they would have red, and then we would say update, update, update. And so usually by keeping things up to date, that prevents, security breaches. This is WordPress. For Squarespace, Wix, and Shopify, they're doing the hosting. They're also kind of mitigating that risk for you. So this is where if that worries you, it might be simpler to use one of those options, because they are managing, they're not actively getting in there and managing it, but it's on them to keep your site secure. So at that point, all you need to do is make sure that your username and login to your website is a password that's not going to be easy for someone to guess or to have a program run. So following, and they might require that anyway, but a certain length, 8 characters or more, having a number, having a capital letter and a lowercase letter, having a special character. Those are the things you do to make your password harder to guess. Okay. Which website hosting platforms can we use WordPress on? Any web host. So GoDaddy is one of the most common. It's not my favorite, but it's one that I know everyone's heard of. We like SiteGround, and that's the one that I've linked in this presentation. But you can search, website host, and then you can, almost all of them allow you to install WordPress on them. And then I heard that WordPress is easily hackable. Is this true? What can you recommend we do to secure our website if we choose WordPress? Okay, so I kind of answered that already. So those are some of the basic things. There are some additional security plugins that you can add. And so, we use Loginizer, which is, Loginizer. And that just lets us set a custom login. It lets us prevent people from attempting to log in more than 5 times. So that could be good, because that, someone can't be trying 100 different combinations until they get in. But if you are not good at remembering your passwords, you can get locked out of your own site that way. So pros and cons to that. But yeah, there's a whole host of tools. And like I said, there's going to be another presentation coming up on website security. So I definitely recommend checking that one out. All right, I think we're caught up on questions.
Oh, Jenny, I love everything that actually comes up during the presentation. This goes to my wonderful attendees. I was actually trying to pose a 30-second survey about today's webinar, but I am having some technical issues here. But please, I will assure you guys that while sending the follow-up emails, I am going to attach the survey link about today's webinar. Remember, we at Tempo SPDC, we cherish your feedbacks, even as it helps us to improve on the services we provide to you guys at a low cost. So please help us, to fill out the 30-second survey. Jenny, are we good?
I think, well, a couple of questions did pop up. You
Oh
want me to get
yeah,
them?
sorry for like just tripping in without seeking for your consent. Let's
Okay,
write because we are left with like 6 minutes.
okay. We'll squeeze these in real quick.
Okay.
So someone said, how do you find out what version of template you are using in Squarespace? Once you have your Squarespace account, you go into your account settings. And unfortunately, I can't show you right now in the presentation, but it's in your account settings and it'll tell you there. Also, when you're going to add templates, you can tell based on the template library. So you have to go into your settings on your profile. And then will you post the link to your website security event? I'm trying to dig up the link, but it's not me, it's Temple. Temple's doing it. So, you know, if you know how to get access to the Temple event workshops list, then you'll be able to find it on there. I was gonna say I was gonna try to post it now, but I'm not gonna find it fast enough. Okay. And then for the people asking about sharing the presentation, yes, you're getting the slides, you're getting the recording, you're getting all the good stuff. Okay, Garba, I think I'm good.
Okay. Thank you once again for a wonderful presentation. Before we wrap it up, as usual, I just want to say a shout out to each and every one of you that actually keep it a date with us. You guys are so good to us. You guys are special to us, and I am sure that we always make you guys happy. Jenny, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I love all the questions that actually came up on board. I love the way the whole presentations, was flowing from head to toe. Everything was just fine. And before I just wrap it up once again, I just want to thank each and every member of, my fellow Temple SPDC colleague for their wonderful support for making this webinar to come into existence. This is actually 12:57, and I think we just cut it off for the day. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yes,
Bye.
please. Yeah.